All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Morgan Horner. I'm one of the fiction editors for this upcoming issue of Superstition Review. Today, I have the honor to be interviewing Stella Pope Duarte on her story, Drenched. Stella is described as a magical weaver with a sure hand and a pure heart, and praised as an author who will enlarge humanity. Her work includes novels, short stories, memoir, and much more. Duarte has won honors and awards nationwide, including a 2009 American Book Award, a Pulitzer Prize nomination, the Southwest Book of the Year Award, and a Book Sense 76 selection. Welcome, Stella. Thank you so much for doing this interview with us. I am so honored to be doing it. When I first read Drenched, I just fell in love with the stories and the characters, and I'm just so excited to get to know more about it. So before we start, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, I'd like to say that I'm very grateful, for this interview because ASU, I mean, I'm an alumni of ASU, so I have high regards for the Superstition Review. I've been published there before, and anything to do with ASU, I like to do anything complimentary that I can as an alumni. And just because I care for ASU, my daughter works there. She works for the provost. She's got some work that she does there. My daughter's very mathematical. I am not mathematical. I'm on the other side of the equation, very much images and all this kind of thing. But she's mathematically inclined, and so I'm just a very faithful alumni person of ASU.
Awesome, wonderful. Thank you so much again. So I'll just hop in with our first question.
Okay.
So in your memoir, you discuss how you create stories through revelations, visions, and dreams, as well as through the experiences from growing up in the barrio. Can you describe the experiences that inspired you to write this story?
This story is actually an imprint of who I was as a child, around the same age as my main character, Patricia. So we have Patricia saying goodbye to her mother as her mother is on her way to Mexico City. And Patricia in the story lives in a barrio, just like I did. And a barrio is not a Spanish word. It's an indigenous word. And it means a small neighborhood, like they say, a vecindad. In other words, very much like a small town, because we lived in this, like mainstream America would say, this terrible place, that was, how did they describe it when I was around Patricia's age in the story? There was a documentary, and they were documenting some of the barrios in Phoenix, and they were saying that my little barrio, which was where Patricia finds herself, which was La Sonorita barrio, was, this is the way I heard it as a child on television, one of the worst slum areas in Phoenix. That's how I heard it from the announcer. So here they're showing our little humble homes, and we were a combination of Black Chicano people in the barrio. And next door was my godmother. I was named after her, Stella, wonderful lady. And then down the way was my uncle, Solomon Pope, because my mother was Rosanna Pope. We're also our ancestors were Irish as well. And then down the way was my house of 12 cousins living in this house, and my grandmother behind them, and so forth. So it was a real community. So that's where Patricia's from. And right away, it talks about the barrio. Mm-hmm. And so she's there. She's saying goodbye to her mother, exactly what I did. Because my mother, her last child, was born, she was having a lot of trouble with her pregnancies. And she had 8 children. So in those days, there was no protection for women. There was nothing really to help them. No good health. The doctors would have to go to the home to deliver the babies, or the midwife, or whoever it was they were using. So my mother was having a lot of trouble with her last pregnancy, which was my sister Lupita, as is named in the story. So my mother made a vow, and this was done all the time in my home. To whom? To La Virgen de Guadalupe, the Virgin. They called her La Virgen Morena, the brown virgin, because she appeared as an indigenous woman. She appeared to a peasant, Juan Diego, in 1531, 10 years after the Spaniards had come in and oppressed the indigenous tribes, who were the majority of them were the Aztec. But there was many other tribes involved. But the Aztec called themselves Mexicas. And now I'm giving you a little less on that. But that's where the word Mexican, Mexican American, Chicanos. I'm a Chicana, because I was born on this side of the border, but I have relatives from Mexico and Ireland as well. So here they call themselves Los Chicanos. So in the story, Patricia is like me, a Chicana. She was born on this side of the border, but now, because her mother made a vow, una manda, to pay her respects to the Virgin, if her child, and this is true, my mother was having so much trouble that my little sister almost died at birth. So when she saw the difficulty the child was having, unable to breathe, they didn't know if she was going to be able to make it, my mother vowed to La Virgen that she would go all the way to Mexico City to La Basilica, where, I don't know if the basilica was totally built at that time because they had an old church, but because Mexico is a marshland, it has a lot of earthquakes. So I don't know if the whole basilica as it is now, because I've been to the basilica. If you have not been, those that are listening to me, if you have never been to the Basilica de la Virgen de Guadalupe, the Dark Virgin, you need to get over there. And I'm telling you one thing, La Virgen de Guadalupe never spoke Spanish. She spoke to this peasant man in the language of the Mexicas. She spoke Nahuatl. People don't understand that La Virgen never spoke Spanish. She identified with the oppressed indigenous people. We had her in every room of my mother's house. There was an image of her, either a candle. So she was a picture, a little statue, whatever. She was a member of our family. You need to understand how powerful this image is in the story. And La Virgen surfaces again in some of my other work. But this work is explicitly about her identification with this little girl who is now saying goodbye to her mother. And I was clinging to my mother. And I remember that it was dark outside when my mother left. And it wasn't these circumstances, with leaving with Tia Lola and all that. It wasn't like that. But I remember I was terrified because I was afraid somebody was, bandits were going to get her. She had to go through mountains. Heaven only knows if she'd come back to me. So at a time when this child, Patricia, is going to face one of the darkest secrets, and I'm attracted to secrets. And I love rumors too. I tell my college students, if you have any rumors, just tell them to me, and I'll build them into a story. So, or secrets, Every family has its secrets, and this family has a very dark secret. And this little girl is going to face it when her mother is gone. And she's not just gone. She's gone to another country. It's not like she can call her on the phone or anything like that. So here you have Patricia just swept into the elements of this family. The Latino family is very open-hearted. They talk about everything in front of the kids, but they also have their secrets, things that they will not speak about. And the question that I ask some students, are you good at guarding secrets? And who in your family has guarded secrets? And how do you know? So all of this is very special to me. So it's the imprint of Patricia. It's really me as a child. I remember saying goodbye to my mom.
Well, that is so beautiful. I immediately, just reading the story about the barrio, a huge sense of community and just loving family, just felt it within me. And I just love that you can put it out on paper like that. I just think that's wonderful. And you kind of led us into our second question. So
Yes,
throughout Drenched, we see the recursion of the image of La Virgen through the medal given to Patricia by her mother. Could you discuss how your faith has inspired and shaped your writing?
the faith of in my family, and I'm sure in many other Latino, Hispanic families, Chicano families as well, was huge, 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 girl. I mean, for me to see my mom praying in front of the image of Our Lady or el Niño Cristo, the Niño, Santo Niño de Atocha, what they call him, a little Christ child figure, was normal. For her to have, white, I don't know, like a beautiful linen set with flowers because it was a day of La Virgen or whatever, was normal. So my faith continues to be such a strong force within me, my connection to God, to Jesus Christ. It continues to live very vibrantly in me. And it was a part of our everyday life. For me to hear somebody in the family say, vamos a rezar y preguntarle a la Virgen, we're going to ask la Virgen to guard us while we're doing this or whatever. So it was like she was at the table with us for Christ. It was like there was no separation of her. And then we had St. Anthony's Church. And you talk about faith and how faith has just gone into almost every story I've ever written because it was so important. And I would walk to the church, which was St. Anthony's, and it wasn't far away. It was maybe, I would say, 4 miles from the home, crossing a few streets and getting to Central Avenue from 7th Avenue. But in those days, children could walk. Now they cannot. It's too dangerous now. A child cannot walk now. You see a child walking, call the police. I'm serious, right? Because of the danger that we have now. But in those days, you could walk with your little pals or by yourself. So I was a child that wanted to be a good little girl. Oh gosh, I wanted to, because I was horrified. They showed us pictures of devils, the old catechism, the Saint Michael fighting this demon with a pointed tail and the whole thing. And I thought, oh no, I don't want to go there. I don't want to go to hell, I used to go to confession every Saturday. I have no idea what I confessed. Maybe that I kicked my sister's doll. I don't know what sins I might have had. But I remember going. So I was very dedicated. And the whole, the St. Anthony's was not only a focal point for the faith, but for our culture. Because we would go there, we would have fiestas, we would have, the queen of the fiesta that year, music. So our entire culture was set around the church, St. Anthony's Church. And then the home became like a domestic church as well. So there was really no separation and no sense of, am I following the right faith? There was no questions about that. We were following the right faith in our minds. We're worshiping God and his mother. So you see the mother, is that where you're asking me if she gave her that little medal? The mother gave her the medal of La Virgen because she was trying to comfort her daughter. Here, we're both going to wear the medal de la Virgen de Guadalupe. And you'll see Patricia grab the medal every so often. She's like, especially when she's facing Annette, her neighborhood little friend, and she grabs it. She grabs it for support. And it makes her feel that her mother's close by. So you have a frightened little girl away from her mother for the first time in her life. And this is what I went through too when my mom was gone. I was so glad when she came back. It was like she had come back from the dead. So.
It's beautiful. I immediately picked up on the medal, and I just think it's so wonderful how she just can find solace in this tiny medal. It's just so much more than that to her. And I just think that it's such a great image to have throughout the story. And so our next question, in this story, the main character, Patricia, is approaching the age of womanhood, but has not quite reached it yet, while Nanette has achieved womanhood by getting her period. Can you explain the intention behind telling this story through the eyes of a young girl instead of a young woman?
I think Patricia needed to tell that story because she was the one struggling with her mother gone, separated for the first time, and then all of a sudden, and I don't want to give the story away because I want people to read it. I think it's a story that they hopefully they will enjoy, and so I'm cautious that I don't want to give it away. But as her mother is gone, she's going to find out something very important. that is going to cast a shadow on her for the rest of her life. But yet she's going to face it, and she's going to have the strength to do it. And part of her strength comes from that medal, from La Virgen being present in her life as well. In other words, the womanhood. And like Nanette has already started her menstrual. That was a big deal, and it's still a big deal for young women. And I lament the fact that in the United States, we don't really have, like some other cultures do, a ceremony. The indigenous do, I believe they have a ceremony for when young girls start their menstrual or they begin to be a woman. We have quinceañeras, but that is like when they're 15 and they're ready to go into society, not when they begin their menstruals. There are some cultures that do celebrate when the young woman begins to have her menstrual, because now she can have babies, So here you have Nanette, her friend, walking and saying, guess what? What happened last night? I started my period. So she's like, what? My character, Patricia's like, no. And she's, yes. And so she's very proud of that, because now she's like one of the women at the school. And that's, eighth graders, yes, she could have started her menstrual, but my Patricia is in fifth. She's not likely to start, but she's horrified. And she clutches the medal. And of course, Nanette says, she had a period too, Blessed Mother. I should like it out. So now my character is like afraid of this coming to be a woman, but her mother's gone. See, so there's an isolation that goes there. But I wish we would celebrate that more, because we don't. It's not only a physical passage of time within the child, but it's psychological as well. And we don't even address it in the schools. I'm a long-time educator, from preschool to university, 30 years of university, college, everything. I've taught every age. And there is no celebration, really. Bar mitzvah is for, the Jewish nation to observe the entrance of a young boy. And now I hear they're doing it for girls as well. So I would want something to celebrate that more. But I wouldn't even know how to begin.
I remember when I first got my period, I think I hid it for a month or two before I finally went to my mom. I was like, hey, mom, because I was just so, it's just not talked about enough, I don't think. And I think it's so interesting how in this story, Patricia, she's not quite like in womanhood yet, because she doesn't have her period, but she's really entering in this adulthood where she kind of has to not fill in for her mother, but kind of learn these family secrets. And of course, in that story, that is kind of pushing her into the adulthood rather than getting her period like Nanette. So I just think it's.
And then she sees her dad respond to Nanette in a different way that he had before. And she's like, what? Why did he, and now she's questioning, because she doesn't trust her father as much as she does her mother. You see that trust level. She trusts her mother much more than she does her father. But then she questions, because then Nanette, tells her something very important. Guess what? Your dad used to be my mom's boyfriend. Thought you'd like to know. And she's in shock. Again, clutches the medal. And her mother's nowhere for her to run to. Not the neighbor Tilly helps her out. But I wish there was more conscious level of where a young woman is during that time. Because I remember that I was told to go down the alley. We lived by the alley, and behind the neighborhood bar. This is where I lived. So I saw everybody go through that alley, from drunks to people just going to the Chinese merchant store, because you had to pass the alley across the street, and there was a Chinese merchant. There was always Chinese merchants in our barrio, and they spoke Spanish right along with us. So I remember my mother giving me money to go to the Chino, what they call the Chino store, and buy a box of Kotex. And I'm like, no, I don't want to go. I was such a shy kid anyway at school. But inside of me was this whole world of words. Words. I used to collect words. I used to sing them inside my head. I thought, people thought, what's wrong with her? I mean, my mother would say, I don't know. Very strange. It's muy rara, mija, muy rara, muy rara. She's very rare. She didn't know how rare. But anyway, so I went to the Chinese store and I bought I was humiliated. I can't even begin to tell. Even now, you see. And I'm glad he put it in a brown paper bag, So that's how I took it home.
So yeah, family,
But some women might be listening to us and saying, oh my goodness, I have a story to tell.
oh yeah, I'm sure everyone, I know so many like crazy stories from high school when people like my friends were getting their periods. So I know every woman out there just has an idea of kind of how important getting their period is in terms of adulthood and womanhood. And it's just a very, yeah, I totally agree with you. We should have some sort of like celebration for it because it is something that should be celebrated.
It is. Yes, definitely.
So, moving on to the next question. As a mother of four and a grandmother, family is very important to you, and I think this can be seen very clearly within the story. So, what messages regarding family do you want readers to be left with after they read Drenched?
Well, family, for one thing, let me take a look at my little notes here. Family is crucial in the Latino world. And if I could say to people who are in family, there are stories to be told from family. And when you have, I encourage my students because they say, well, Stella, I don't do good with memoir. That's okay. You can take something like the imprint that I had of myself being Patricia, saying goodbye to my own mother on a dark night when there was a canopy of glittering stars overhead. I remember that as a child, and it's in the story. And then the rest of the story is creative. So then you humbly move away from your story, how shall I say, and you allow the power of the story to be told. Because every single family has a way of addressing the stories that represent who they are. And those stories can be represented as the nucleus of your theme, because as writers, we reveal the human condition in our work. And there's nothing to show you the human condition more than a family. You have people that will take their stand and say, this is what happened that Christmas. And you say, no, it wasn't. That's the Christmas you got that bike. And I got that stupid little transistor radio. No, it wasn't. Excuse me. But that was the time that you got that expensive. Oh my gosh. And there's a fight over a memory, right? Mm-hmm. So every family has bunches of memories. So I would just say to people, keep track of the things that are important throughout your life, in your family life. Can you set them in to parts of your stories? Can you move away from them and create something new? That's up to the person, because you don't want to tie yourself down to something. What happens sometimes with people when they do memory work of their families is, was the tablecloth checkered, or who cares? Memory is not accurate. Memory is not accurate. You can remember it was a really rainy day. No, it wasn't. It hadn't rained in Phoenix for days. So, but those kinds of things are subjective. So I would say, don't be afraid, of anything to do with family, and how you can put little bits and pieces of family, and as you're moving through. And you said, what is it? You said, oh, what is it that Patricia's story is really telling? And she's guarding the secret. And actually, if you notice because I wouldn't want to get into the secret itself, but when the mother gets back, she looks at her mother and she says, they're gone. Nanette and Suki. Suki's the mother. They're gone. And she knows without, watch how beautiful it is in a story, in real life, in a family, without her mother telling her anything, just the look of her mother told her that her mother already knew.
That is so,
And
yeah,
when I'm gone, Virgen is going to take care of everything. You see?
yeah,
Virgen is going to take care of everything.
that's wonderful. Yeah, family is just, I think, is something that's just so important. You grow up around these people, they're going to influence your life in so many ways. And I was blessed with three younger siblings, so I definitely know how to pick apart their little actions, write them in my own little stories, and yeah, I just loved the family in this story, and the family and the community. That's like, it may not be her direct family, but she has family outside of her parents and her sister. So I just thought it was just so beautiful. So, you have published works in several genres, from memoir to short story. Can you describe how your writing process changes and adapts for each form?
That's a really important question because it has to do with this huge source of energy that is creative writing. And sometimes people don't understand that, well, they do, but we live it out each day and we forget that we are energy. That's who we are. The blink of our eyes, the gesture of our hand, our movements, the way we move this way or that way, or the way we approach something. We are energy. And creative writing is a huge energy. And unless we understand, and I'll say that again in the last question, it'll connect with that. How do you connect with your own creative energy? I can't tell you how important that was. Because as a child, I used to go and read all kinds of books and come home with a stack of books. My mother said I was going to go blind. Well, she wasn't far from the truth. I'm like, can I still see? But because I was reading always so much. And then I'd get the neighborhood kids together. I was real shy at school, introvert. I was voted the shyest girl in school throughout my life. And then I would come in. I had all these words. I had all this stuff inside of me. I didn't know it was the creative energy. I thought it was just something wrong. How come people didn't think like this? I could describe anything at the drop of a pen. And people would say, how did you describe that? I have no idea. I just did it. So here I was, full of all of these words and all of these longings and all of these things that is part of the creative process. And I suffered depressions. You need to understand. I'm talking to writers now. When you are producing something, you're way up here, because that's how strong creative energy is. You have to come down. You have to come down from there. And this is where, like, drug addicts who unfortunately get involved, in getting their high, guess what? They got to come crashing down. That's why they're going to go look for their drug again, whatever, to keep their mind still, because the brain is no fool. Once it's getting something from the outside, it's going to make the body demand that, and that's where the addiction comes in. I'm talking about something very separate. But creative energy also goes up, and then it comes down. See, I didn't understand that at all. So every one of these genres has its own creative energy. It's the same energy, but it moves in a direction. If you're a poet, some of you that are listening to this are poets, you have the same creative energy that I'm talking about. And it's going to move in a different way. But I want people to understand that writing anything is like writing a symphony. It really is, because your own voice is caught up in the paper. And I've had editors, I started with short stories. Short stories, in my mind, is my strongest genre. I love short stories. Because in a short story, you can take one theme that's important and explore it more than you could. You can do that in a novel as well, but in a short story, you can do it in less time and maybe keep people more attracted to what it is you're doing. So the short story is a powerful way to do it. If you can humbly stay out of the story, let the characters run your life, let them push you around, let them tell you what to do, and don't get in the way of the story. if a person finds themselves too close to the protagonist, they may be stumbling, on their own shoelaces. So they need to step back from the story. They need to step back. So the story in each genre or whatever it is that the writer is doing is different. So I found that in short story, when I started doing the novel, I had to shift a little bit because the novel is longer and you can tell a little bit more, you can narrate more. A short story, no, it's quicker. Your narration has to be specific, your dialogue has to be there. You always want to show more than you tell. And then of course poetry, and it is all arithmetic. You dun 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 dun. I've taught poetry to tiny little kids that have stood. I've showed them how to get on microphones and read their work to the public. And boy, I tell you, and once they understand that it's a deep, oh, Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall. Yeah, the Dumpty had a great fall. Da, 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 da. Oh, you mean they don't have to be in straight? No, they don't have to be in straight lines. You're doing poetry. You want to go like this, swerve all over the. So that's a whole. You see how it's the same energy, but you're using it a different way. And then of course there's screenplays. I've done it all. Screenplays. I've had one of my plays performed at ASU, and they did a very good job. It was a one-act play about a community, a political, related to immigration. It was related to immigration. So it was a very painful type of experience, but I kind of put a comedic kind of layer to it. And I'll be darned, I was in the audience watching my play performed at ASU West, and the people loved it. And I thought, wow, take a look at this. They were charmed they were clapping. And I thought, wow, so this is what it feels, to do a play and to see the people's reaction and so forth. And I've done a screenplay as well for one of my novels that's going to head for the movie, the big screen. So, but every one of them is a different kind of energy, but it's the same energy. So when I'm working sometimes with an editor, say from Michigan, I remember that he would change a word in the sentence, that it wasn't a spelling error. It wasn't an error that was a verb tense error problem. It was just, he would just change something. So I started asking him, why did you change that sentence? Because he was putting it maybe in the way that he heard it. I said, don't you understand? There's a symphony going on the pages. There's a song being sung. Dun, 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 dun. He goes, what? I said, that's the way I do my work. That's what you call the voice of the author. People want to read your work because they love your voice. I said, in other words, I was trying to tell him, don't change my voice. If I'm doing something wrong, I needed a semicolon, whatever, rather than a colon, then correct me. Otherwise, so he got the idea. And after a while, he started saying, okay, Stella, I understand. But every one of the writers, whoever's listening to me, you have your own distinct voice. You might have to shift it for the genre that you're addressing. And you can do that. But it's that same powerhouse that I'm talking about. And the more you use it, guess what? Just like you practice baseball, you practice whatever sport, you get better. You are going to get to the point where you will understand. And as you read your work aloud, for any writer who's listening to me now, if you are not reading your work aloud, no matter what it is, no matter what genre it is, you are failing yourself because you are not hearing what the readers are going to hear inside their heads. So I always tell my students, at the beginning levels, you don't have to read it all the way through, but at the beginning levels you do, because you want to get your voice like a symphony on those pages. And then later you can read it silently, so you can hear how you sound in someone's head. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, no, I as a writer, I've never read to myself, so I think I will definitely start doing that now because I love that your voice is a symphony. I've never heard it that way before. I think that's really wonderful. Yeah, just like thrown back. I love that phrase now. I'm gonna put that on my inspiration board.
Yes. Trust me. I tell students, I'm going to tell you who's going to be successful, whoever reads their work aloud to themselves, so they can hear how they sound. Dun, 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 dun. And they're like, I had no idea I sounded like that. And then the realization of how real your voice is on paper.
Wonderful. So that also leads us into our next question. So you've taught and spoken on creative writing for many years. What is one piece of advice that you find yourself repeating most often? And what is one piece of advice that has been most helpful to you?
Well, for one thing, what I encourage them to do is respect their own creative energy, just like I've been saying. Take a look at where their creative energy is going, the highs and the lows. Okay. I present it all across this nation. And when COVID hit, it took that away from me, the ability to go all over the place and do. So now I'm zooming in here, I'm zooming in there, I'm zooming into classroom, I'm zooming into conferences, whatever. But I used to come home, I have 4 children. I had 3 jobs, I had 4 children. So anybody who tells me, I don't have any time, I've been to so many conferences, and sometimes I'm the keynote speaker, I'm a workshop person or whatever. And people will tell me, well, Stella, I just have, as soon as we sell the house, I'll have more time. Or as soon as I'm changing careers right now, as soon as that happens, I'll have more time. There's never a good time. You have to carve out the time for your work to be done, because there's this force inside of you. And if you don't relate to that force, whatever you ignore becomes a squeaky wheel, and it becomes almost your enemy. It's going to take you down in one way or another, because you're not paying attention to that force that is your own strength, and it'll start squeaking. I do a lot of dream work, so dreams are very important to me too. I have my whole thing, writing through revelations, visions, and dreams, and that's my own little memoir. And this is internal stuff. So inside of every one of my writers, I tell them, my writers, this is what I tell them: trust yourself. Trust yourself. Look internally. The writer is in here. The writer is not out here scattered. The writer is internal. So respect that internal writer. And I tell them, if you have things that come to you while you're writing from left field, out of nowhere, all of a sudden you're thinking of some insanity. It's not insanity. You're writing a short story, or you're writing poetry. It's a writer within you giving you something that it appears to be disconnected. And I tell people, one of the reasons why we're on the earth is to connect the dots of who we are. Nobody can connect the dots of who you are, Martin, except you. You, who pays attention to an internal part of who you are and begins to say, wait a minute. Oh, I see it. Oh, okay. Right. So that's why that happened when my mother left for Mexico City, Patricia, right? That's what happened. That's why they moved away from the neighborhood. Now she's connecting the dots of what happened so long ago. So if something comes from left field, I'll give you a real quick example. I was writing Let Their Spirits Dance, released by HarperCollins, and here in this country and in other countries as well. So I was writing it in the beginning, parts of the novel. So here I am writing it. All of a sudden I start thinking of bats, bats that fly out and at night and seek insects or whatever, and then go back to their cave and so forth. Bats. And I kept on writing, and the bats kept coming into my mind. So now, little by little, I learned how to stop and go to left field. Left field, I mean things that don't make any sense. So I closed the document I was working on, and this was when I was writing Let Their Spirits Dance. And I opened a new document on bats. I just put the word bats. So I started writing on these crazy bats. Oh my God. One of the most powerful characters that I have ever worked with appeared through that left field experience. So here comes Don Florencio, who was a tachisti. A tachisti is an ancient word in the Mexica language, meaning a seer. Here comes Don Florencio into Let Their Spirits Dance, my novel. So powerful that he almost took over the entire novel. And he came out of the word bats. Had I not followed left field into the word bats, I would have never known Don Florencio. I had to calm this old guy down. I'm serious. I don't know who's going to play him in the movie, but I had to calm this old guy up. And I said, look, Don Florencio, you can't have this novel. This novel belongs to Jesse. He's the one that was killed in Vietnam. This is not your novel. So, but he permeated the novel all the way through with his magic and his ability to see through everything. So don't be afraid of left field. Okay, and let me tell you something very important, because I get asked this all the time. Every conference I've ever been to, somebody is asking me this, and I was just asked the other day, because I was zoomed into a high school class, a writing club. One of the questions, writer's block. Oh, Stella, what about writer's block? I have had people in conferences raise their hand. Stella, I'm having a problem with writer's block. I haven't been able to write in like a year. I mean, and there's almost tears in it. Sometimes people are like almost teary-eyed because they can't write. They've got writer's block. They don't know what to do, that kind of thing. And I tell people everywhere, and I tell my students, and I told the kids 2 weeks ago when they wanted to know what writer's block was. I said, are you guys ready? I'm going to tell you the secret of writer's block. And when I say that to a large audience, I can see them with their little pens, ready to write down Stella's secret. I said, here's the secret about writer's block. It's a lie. And they go, what? What did she say? She said it's a lie. Did Stella just say it's a lie? Yes. It's a lucrative lie, because people make a lot of money selling that lie. You go on the internet right now and put in the words writer's block, and you're going to find bunches of books that are going to give you the solution and how to get out of writer's block so you can continue to do your work. Bull. It's nothing but a lie. You know what writer's block is? It's just a silent writer. It's a silent writer inside of you. Just like when something is brewing, you're cooking something in the oven and you got to leave it in there for 13, 15 minutes, whatever, and then it's done. There's things brewing. You cannot push your creative energy. Am I making any sense? You can't do that. The creative energy is so powerful, it will push you. You don't have to push it. So you wait until it's ready. And let me tell you something about creative energy and this crummy thing of writer's block. Our internal person, it doesn't go by this watch, this wristwatch. Inside of you, you're timeless. You're a timeless human being. You can wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I often do. I'm a night owl. You can call me at 2 if you want to, Morgan. I will answer the phone. I'm hopeless night owl. I'm hopeless. I do a lot of work because there's no calls. I had 4 children. You can imagine. I'd come home tired from New York City or whatever, and they were fighting over a bag of potato chips. So reality hit me real quick. Mom's home now. Oh my God, get all that dirty clothes and put. Oh my goodness. So by then, some of them were teenagers, so they were supposedly taking care of themselves. But don't be afraid of the energy inside of you, of communicating with it. You might be at an intersection and well, writer's block, I haven't heard about, I don't know what to do. And at an intersection, you might get the next part of the story, just like that. So I always used to tell my kids, one time my kid wrote it on the palm of his hand because we were driving. I said, son, write this word down. I need it because it's part of the story. And he goes, where, Mom? Write it on the palm of your hand. Get my pen. So he writes down what I told him. Because you can get a revelation anywhere. A revelation is just understanding something that's already there inside of you. Am I making sense? It's already there. You're the one who has to be conscious of it. And don't believe writer's block. It's a bunch of lies. And trust, let me see what else I have here. Trust who you are. See what else is there. What else is there? But I'm glad to be sure I'm getting everything I want about what I tell writers to do or not do. Okay. Oh, let your characters push you around. That's okay if they push you around. They don't want to obey you. That's fine. They don't need to obey you. You're just a scribe. You're at their mercy. And there's no writer's block. And then, let's see what else. Writing is the human experience, and we have the right to tell it. We have the right.
Stella, are you still there?
Do not ever send to submission a first draft. Don't do that. Don't do that, because a first draft is a jumble. It should be a jumble, because you're getting everything together, and it might go this way, it might go this way, it might go that way. And the other day, I'm on a board. I don't want to name where I'm on a board for, but one of the submissions was the first draft. And I said, right there, we should have not have gone forward any longer, because the first draft is never ready to do that, to go forward. So trust yourself. Be careful. This is real important. Are you listening to me, writers? Be careful who you show your work to. Careful. Not everybody's a writer. You go to my tia or my tio. I mean, they're not more educated. Half of them, they already spoke English. What's I going to do? Do you like this story? Oh, yeah, it sounds real good. It's got a lot of action, or whatever. They don't know how to help you. You might go to a friend who isn't really a creative writer, who might look at your work and say, this is pretty good. And it might be the worst thing that has ever been done. So be careful. You know why I'm saying? Because that person can destroy your work. You can show that especially when you're barely starting to work, and you show it to somebody and they'll say, that's really good. You should go this way. They don't know, because you don't have your story set. The story belongs to you, or the poem, or whatever. You are the one who has to form it. Now, once you get it straight to where do you know how many versions I have of my work? I'm a workaholic. Look at me. I mean, what do I look like? I'm a workaholic. You can tell already. Sometimes I have 20 versions of one novel, and that's not enough, but I still have to polish it. And nobody has seen it yet. Nobody has seen it. Maybe I've read a few things, to people. I have my sister who's one of my muses, wonderful sister of mine, Rosie, who passed away, and she was my greatest supporter in the family. I still turn to her, even though she's gone. I tell her, spiritually, sis, what a knucklehead I am. Help me, and then I seem to get an idea. Thanks, sis. Use whatever causes you more power, but be careful who you show your work to. Be sure that you have humbly stepped away from it to allow your work to come forth from you. And then with confidence, you might show it to someone. Does that make sense to you? Mm-hmm. Yeah, be careful. Okay.
Awesome. Wow, this was so insightful, and I deeply enjoyed this interview. Thank you again for agreeing to do it. I'm so excited for our SR followers to read your story and learn more about you and Drenched. And this is just so much fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it very much. God bless you. Bye-bye.